Hello and welcome to Rauta's Reviews, non-metal one this time, however very metal related, so much even metal related that you can actually find this one on Metal Archives as well. This is Karl Sanders of the death metal band Nile with his solo project called just Karl Sanders, and this one is the third album called Saurian Apocalypse. Third album, and it has been quite a while since the project was active, because that is, the first album came as early as 2004 when Nile was a relatively young band, well, still quite experienced, but you get the idea. And 2009 came the second album, which I never got to hear. I mean, I reviewed the first album fresh when it came out, and it was, well, good one. The second album totally missed, and I guess I thought this one was buried. The thing here is the first album was released by a little bit bigger label, Relapse, and then later on it ended up on this smaller album. However, that is now out through Napalm Records as well as this baby. So I guess finally Karl Sanders has found proper home for his pet project, aside from now that is. Now, as you can see, this one has been out since 2004, the project I mean. And there was a rather long break between the album 2 and 3, 13 years and all. But I guess it has been worth wait, because Saurian Apocalypse is actually pretty interesting an album. However, it isn't as good as the first one, and I'll try to explain why I really think that. Now, this album lasts for over 60 minutes, roughly, but still, and maybe it's a little bit too much unless you're really a fan of the style. The style, you ask, is something that is kind of a harder cookie to crack. Is it world music? Is it folk music? Is it some kind of ambient? Well, depends once again who are you asking this question. I guess world music is a little bit vague kind of a way to describe this music, but then again I really think that it actually describes this better than the other ones. Some say it's Arabic folk music, which I guess also is somewhat truthful, but I don't know if that actually tells you the whole story here. But let's not focus on the details. Let's just give you this little bit of a all-around idea. Now, first of all, Karl Sanders is mostly known as the guitar player of Nile, but he also plays some other instruments, more traditional ones. And they're here. I cannot pretend I know how they actually sound like played live and all that stuff, so I don't know how these instruments are done. But there are lots of different string instruments used, in addition to drums and percussion ones, which are then here as well, creating this rather folky stuff. Now, all in all, this album sounds kind of a world music being soundtrack-like. That means it might remind you some of the movies, especially we're talking about historical epic ones. And then it might be hard to say, yeah, it's this Arabic story or Egyptian one or whatever. But there are these parts where, like, you might be thinking like TV show Rome, by the way, fucking great TV series, and things like that. Or maybe you're thinking about some biblical story, historical or fiction or whatever. And this could be, giving ideas of that. Now, there are also acoustic guitar parts which are really more like video game music. I'm thinking about Diablo 2 with the acoustic dark tunes, which are something that really, clicked with me when listening to this album. I mean, I started to get, especially the last track, I started thinking Diablo 2 right away. It was like, and it's not the only track doing that. Now, there are also parts which then again brings me more modern video game soundtracks. Games like Assassin's Creed series. So there are these parts where certain percussions or folky instruments come into play and created this interesting selection of soundtrack-like music. There are some vocals, but not too much. It's mostly spoken parts or more like humming kind of a thing. So it's not so much like there are, a lot of lyrics included and all that stuff. So it's mostly instrumental stuff in the soundtrack world fashion. Now, that creating this folky world music like soundtrack thing is a little bit of a mess. It's not really well balanced, and more importantly, some tracks just sound like they're way too long. Like this last track, more than 10 minutes. So a little bit more compact versus the more than 60 minutes of music could have done this a favor. But it's just my opinion, of course. You might be just like, wow, this is 10 out of 10. Now, this is a hard cookie for crack to metalheads, because like I said, there are literally no metal at all. However, some of the acoustic guitar parts are something that I could almost hear my brain doing the translation. This could really favor, do the trick that is when you just would use distorted guitars and start doing kind of a Nile riffing. It's almost like death metal kind of acoustic. And I think it's kind of a fun, but that being said, no vocals and kind of a little bit here and there, kind of a combination of songs and ideas and riffs and patterns. It can be a little bit like too much for a lot of people, especially if you give this multiple listens back to back like I always do when I'm doing reviews. I mean, that is my way to test if the album can really hold it together well. And this is no Nile album. I'm a big fan of Nile, so pretty much I can say all the Nile albums are wonderful. But with Karl Sanders' solo projects, yeah, not that good, even though, like I said, the debut album is good. This is decent, definitely decent. The production is right there, and some of the parts here, some of the songs have really, really nice ideas. But overall, this is like no contest versus the debut album. But it's definitely worth giving a shot, especially if you're an Egyptian fan, you're a Nile fan, you're a Karl Sanders fan, or a soundtrack fan. I happen to be more or less all of those four, but it still doesn't click me, like fully to the max. But definitely worth giving a shot. It's an interesting release and something else than your typical metal release, because it's not metal, but still done by a metalhead. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if anything really makes sense these days. But here you are. Check out the music from your favorite streaming services or links provided in the description box. More info you will be finding from them anyway. So give it a go or give it not, up to you. Meanwhile, take care. Bye-bye.